Hello everyone, I am Alyssa Corminal of BSED English 1, and for today we will discuss about the 5 hypotheses of Krashen's theory on second language acquisition. But first, let us have a short introduction on who Stephen Krashen is. Stephen Krashen is Emeritus Professor of Education at the University of Southern California. He is best known for his work in establishing a general theory of second language acquisition, as the co-founder of the natural approach, and as the inventor of sheltered subject matter in teaching. Stephen Krashen is an expert in the field of linguistics, specializing in theories of language acquisition and development. Much of his research is involved in the study of non-English and bilingual acquisition. This is a brief description of Krashen's widely known and well-accepted theory of second language acquisition, which has had a large impact in all areas of second language research and teaching since 1980s. Krashen's theory of second language acquisition consists of 5 main hypotheses. Number 1, the acquisition learning hypothesis. Number 2, the monitor hypothesis. Number 3, the natural order hypothesis. Number 4, the input hypothesis. And number 5, the affective filter hypothesis. Let us talk first about the acquisition learning hypothesis. The acquisition learning distinction is the most fundamental of all the hypotheses in Krashen's theory, and the most widely known among linguists and language practitioners. According to Krashen, there are 2 independent systems of second language performance: the acquired system and the learning system. The acquired system or acquisition is the product of a subconscious process very similar to the process of children undergoing when they acquire their first language. It requires meaningful interaction in the target language and the natural communication in which speakers are concentrated not in the form of their utterances but in the communicative act. The learned system or the learning is the product of formal instruction, and it comprises a conscious process which results in the conscious knowledge about the language. For example, knowledge of grammar rules. According to Krashen, learning is less important than acquisition. Next is the monitor hypothesis. The monitor hypothesis explains the relationship between acquisition and learning, and it defines the influence of the latter on the former. The monitoring function is the practical result of the learned grammar. According to Krashen, the acquisition system is the utterance initiator, while the learning system performs the role of monitor or the editor. The monitor acts in the planning, editing, and correcting function when 3 specific conditions are met. That is, number 1, if the language learner has sufficient time at his or her disposal. Number 2, if she or he focuses on the form or thinks about correctness. And number 3, if she knows the rule of the language. It appears that the role of conscious learning is somewhat limited in the second language performance. According to Krashen, the role of the monitor is or should be minor, being able to use only correct deviations from normal speech and to give speech a more polished appearance. Krashen also suggests that there is individual variation among language learners with regard to monitor use. He distinguishes those learners that use the monitor all the time, or the overusers, those learners who have not learned or who prefer not to use their conscious knowledge, or the underusers, and those learners that use the monitor appropriately, or the optimal users. An evaluation of the person's psychological profile can help to determine to what group they belong. For example, usually extroverts are underusers, while introverts and perfectionists are overusers. The third hypothesis is the natural order. The natural order hypothesis is based on the research findings which suggested that the acquisition of grammatical structures follows a natural order which is predictable. For a given language, some grammatical structures tend to be acquired early while others are late. These orders seem to be independent of the learner's age, L1 background, conditions of exposure, and although the agreement between the individual acquirers was not always 100% in the studies, there were statistically significant similarities that reinforced the existence of natural order of language acquisition. Krashen, however, points out that the implication of the natural order hypothesis is not the language program syllabus should be based on the order found in the studies. In fact, he rejects grammatical sequencing when the goal is language acquisition. The fourth hypothesis is the input hypothesis. The input hypothesis is Krashen's attempt to explain how the learner acquires a second language. In other words, this hypothesis is Krashen's explanation of how second language acquisition takes place. So the input hypothesis is only concerned with the acquisition and not learning. According to this hypothesis, the learner improves and progresses along the natural order when she or he receives the second language input that is one step beyond his or her current stage of linguistic competence. For example, if a learner is at a stage I, then acquisition takes place when he or she is exposed to comprehensible input that belongs to level I+1. Since not all of the learners can be at the same level of linguistic competence at the same time, Krashen suggests that natural communicative input is the key to designing a syllabus, ensuring in this way that each learner will receive some I+1 input that is appropriate for his or her current stage of linguistic competence. Finally, the fifth hypothesis, the affective filter hypothesis. This hypothesis embodies Krashen's view that a number of affective variables play a facilitative but non-casual role in the second language acquisition. These variables include motivation, self-confidence, and anxiety. Krashen claims that learners with high motivation, self-confidence, a good self-image, and a low level of anxiety are better equipped for success in second language acquisition. Meanwhile, low motivation, low self-esteem, and debilitating anxiety can combine to raise the affective filter and form a mental block that prevents comprehensible input from being used for acquisition. In other words, when the filter is up, it impedes language acquisition. On the other hand, positive affect is necessary, but not sufficient on its own for acquisition to take place. That ends our discussion on the 5 hypotheses of Krashen's theory on second language acquisition. Thank you for listening, and once again, good day.